It is a strange and inappropriate notion for a girl to marry three men at once, but sometimes a person becomes so blinded by selfishness that he forgets the difference between right and wrong and makes decisions that put many lives at risk. My mother, driven by greed for our family's wealth, made such a horrible decision. She bound all three of my brothers together with this girl in one marital arrangement, and the events of the wedding night, when we three brothers were united with our bride, still sends shivers down my spine. We were three brothers, and I was the youngest. My father died when I was born, which made me very sensitive. Even the smallest matter would upset me immediately. One day, after returning home from college, I received a phone call from my uncle's house. The news that followed left all of us in utter shock. It was a call from my uncle's long-trusted employee, who, through tears, informed us that my uncle and aunt were on their way to another city when their vehicle met with an accident and they died on the spot. Upon hearing this news, I felt as though I had spun around and collapsed onto a cot. My uncle and aunt had always been kind, noble, and cheerful. Ever since our father passed away, they had taken care of us, managing our home affairs in both good and bad times. My uncle used to look after every little detail of our lives, and losing him now felt as though I'd become an orphan all over again. My mother was no different. She was deeply shattered by the loss of her only son, who had been her pillar of support. We were very young when our father died, so the news of my uncle's passing broke her completely. We arranged for both of my brothers to be called from the office, and together we set out for my uncle's house. Our home was in the outskirts of the city, whereas my uncle lived in a very posh area. He had no shortage of wealth or property. He ran his own factory, lived in a large bungalow, and had a considerable bank balance, but all he had left behind was his only daughter, Dua, for whom he shed endless tears. When we reached my uncle's house, a crowd had already gathered, businessmen who knew him and many friends and acquaintances. The moment Dua saw my mother, she ran to embrace her. Both began to cry, overwhelmed by grief. Our sorrow was immense, but Dua's anguish was even greater. Suddenly, the pain of losing one's parents becomes unbearable, and her condition worsened considerably. We then took care of all the funeral arrangements and completed the burial. Later that night, a new problem arose. How could we leave Dua alone? My mother, supported by the employees, refused to let her go and insisted that Dua must not come to our home. She said that in that house all the memories of her parents remained, and she could never leave her parents' home behind. Finally, my mother decided that we would all stay with Dua for a few days. Since all three of my brothers were unmarried, living at my uncle's house was not a problem for us. We stayed there for 3 days. The time passed quickly. Sometimes when I encountered Dua, my heart sank even further. She was 2 or 3 years older than me, though our relationship had always been one of mutual respect. At that time, her condition was such that she could only cry continuously. My brothers had taken leave due to their sorrow, and after spending 3 days away from college, we asked our mother to come back. My mother was sitting in her room. The room that belonged to our uncle and aunt was being used by my mother, while Dua had her own room, which was always locked. When the three of my brothers and I told our mother that 3 days had passed, the holiday was over, and we had to return home, she looked at us with strange eyes and asked, "Where has your common sense gone? What need do you have for a job now?" Then she cast a glance at Uncle's room and continued, "Why should we leave this empire and return to a hut? Your uncle counted every rupee he ever gave me. He used to help us secretly, even through your aunt's support, as if it were a favor. Now that his daughter is in my care, I will keep this golden bird locked in a cage for life. It will flutter in its cage while we live in luxury." My mother's words shocked me, for I could never imagine that she would harbor such hatred toward our uncle and aunt, especially when our uncle had always been there to help us. It was thanks to him that the three of us managed to get an education, even if his help came discreetly. Yet she had never left any favor undone for them, and I could not understand why she now held a grudge. Both of my brothers agreed with her, saying that if everything were arranged properly, a business would be easily secured and we wouldn't need jobs. Then my mother told my elder brothers, "From tomorrow, you all must go to Uncle's office and take over their affairs. Moreover, you don't need to study in a government college. I will enroll you in a top private college." I wanted to protest that government colleges also offer good education, but I never had the courage to oppose her, so I remained silent. Meanwhile, Dua remained locked in her room, completely unaware of what was happening. The next morning, my mother sent both of my brothers to Uncle's office to handle the matters there, and she herself ordered the household staff to rearrange the entire house. She had taken down the large portraits from Uncle and Aunt's walls and moved them to the storeroom. An old employee who had been extremely loyal to Uncle remarked, "Dua Bibi will surely be angry. This entire setup was done by them." My mother then explained to him in a gentle tone, "If you wish to work in this house, listen quietly to my instructions, or I will have you removed." The authoritative manner in which she spoke was striking, and although the employee was amazed, he fell silent because he knew his place. By midday, my mother had completely transformed the layout of the house. Everything belonging to Uncle and Aunt was now in the storeroom. After lunch, when Dua emerged from her room, she was astonished by what she saw. In a fit of anger, she demanded, "Who did all this?" My mother embraced her lovingly and said, "My dear daughter, I did this so that your sorrow may lessen. If you keep seeing the belongings of your parents, their memories will always haunt you. That is why, for a while, I have kept all these items in the storeroom." Hearing these words, Dua grew very angry and started arguing with my mother, but my mother sternly rebuked her, saying, "Everything I am doing is for your own good." These events left me deeply disturbed. I had never expected our mother, who had always been so caring despite our hardships, to turn against the very people who had once helped raise us. Yet there it was, a bitter twist of fate driven by greed and a desire to control the remnants of our family's wealth. My brothers, though quiet and resigned, accepted our mother's decisions without protest, convinced that a proper business would be secured if all matters were arranged this way. I, on the other hand, struggled with conflicting emotions. I remembered the times when our uncle had lovingly supported us, ensuring we had the opportunity to study and grow. Now his legacy was being dismantled piece by piece, and our mother's actions seemed to betray that trust. The house, which once echoed with memories of warmth and family support, had now become a battleground for greed and control. Despite my inner turmoil, I dared not speak against my mother. I remained silent, burdened by a sense of helplessness. Every day as I went about my chores, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family was being torn apart by forces we could neither control nor understand. Yet amid the bitterness, I still clung to a fragile hope that one day, the truth of our past would restore the love and unity we once shared. And so, as our lives took this unexpected turn, I learned that sometimes even those closest to you may be driven by forces you never imagined. A harsh lesson that, in the end, shapes your destiny. My mother forcefully grabbed her and took her to that room, saying, "From now on, you must stay in this room. I will have your meals delivered here. The more you go outside, the more you will be reminded of your parents." Mother intended to confine her to a corner, but Dua was an educated girl in her final year of graduation. She was smart enough to realize how, immediately after her parents died, her aunt had tried to seize control of her home, and that realization filled her with burning anger. That same evening, a young man came home and said he wished to see Dua. My mother asked in astonishment, "Who are you, and why have you come?" At that moment, Dua emerged from her room and walked into the drawing room. As soon as my mother saw the young man, she immediately embraced him and burst into tears. When Dua stepped back, our aunt cried out, "What kind of farce is this? You are a young girl. How can you be embracing a stranger?" Then she said, "This is Bilal. I love him. We will be married soon." At the sound of Dua's words, my mother's eyes lit up as if a new dream had been born. My mother had always longed to seize control of Uncle's property, and now Dua was involving someone else in the mix. Silently, my mother let the two converse. Then, when Bilal left, she ordered the watchman, "If Bilal comes near, do not let him enter. Tell him that Dua has gone to live with her aunt." My mother then demanded sleeping pills from me and began mixing them into every meal she prepared. Gradually, Dua fell into a constant sleep, so much so that she barely regained consciousness. My mother even turned off Dua's phone and left it in a corner. Cunningly, my mother advanced toward her goal, while both my brothers had already taken full control of the business. Everyone was convinced that when the lawyer arrived and explained that all of my mother's plans were doomed, nothing would remain of her schemes. At some point, Uncle had drafted a will stating that after the marriage, all his property would belong to Dua. My mother knew that Dua would never marry a man chosen freely and happily by her, so she asked the lawyer to suggest an alternative. There were many business decisions still pending that needed to be made. Then my mother also wanted to withdraw money from the bank to fulfill her past desires. The lawyer said, if Dua does not marry, then there is only one option left. If her mental state remains unstable, custody of this property will be granted to you, since you have no other relatives. Thus, everything will come under your control. The lawyer finished his explanation and left, but my mother was lost in thought, wondering how to resolve Dua's marriage matter. After all, she was mentally fragile and hardly capable of making sound decisions. 2 days later, my mother completely lost her mind. First, she fired that old loyal employee of Uncle, with whom she had always had great sympathy for Dua. She told him, I can now handle all the household work myself. I no longer need you, especially since our business suffered severely after my brother's death, and we cannot afford unnecessary expenses. The poor man reluctantly agreed, but my mother forced him out. Then she fully took control of Dua. I could not bear my mother's actions because, unlike her, I was not so callous. I had always loved Dua as if she were my elder sister, so the thought of anything wrong happening to her was unbearable to me. Yet whenever I tried to say something, my mother would scold me sharply and silence me. Below is the 1,000-word English translation with additional scenes and details, exactly as requested. My mother forcefully grabbed Dua and took her into that room, saying, from now on, you must remain in this room. I will have your meals sent here, and every time you step outside, you will only be reminded of your parents. She intended to confine her to a corner, yet Dua, an educated girl in her final year of graduation, was far too perceptive. She knew all too well how, after our parents died, our aunt had attempted to seize control of our home. That memory fueled a burning anger in her heart. Later that same evening, a young man arrived at the house and announced that he wished to meet Dua. My mother, taken aback, demanded, who are you and why have you come? At that moment, Dua left her room and walked into the drawing room. As soon as my mother saw the young man, she immediately threw her arms around him and burst into tears. Witnessing this, our aunt glared and shouted, what is this farce? You are a young girl. How can you embrace a stranger? Then she added, this is Bilal. I love him, and we will be married soon. The sound of Dua's voice declaring her love for Bilal lit up my mother's eyes, as if a long-forgotten dream had been revived. My mother had always longed to control our uncle's wealth, and now Dua's involvement with Bilal threatened to derail her designs. Silently, my mother allowed the two to converse until Bilal eventually left. After he departed, she ordered the watchman, if Bilal comes near, do not let him enter. Tell him that Dua has gone to live with her aunt. Soon after that incident, as soon as the loyal servant was dismissed, my mother began administering various drugs to Dua. These medications were meant to keep her sedated so that she would remain in a perpetual state of sleep. Instead, they made her mumble incoherently and speak in strange, dreamy tones. My mother herself had procured these drugs and hoped that, by their influence, Dua would become so mentally unbalanced that she would never be able to function normally. Soon, my mother began announcing to everyone that the shock of losing her parents had driven Dua insane. Meanwhile, Bilal returned in search of Dua. He pounded at the door and, after much commotion, threatened to call the police when the watchman first claimed that no one was home. My mother hurried to the door with Bilal, and together they reached Dua. In her altered state, Dua spoke in a disjointed manner, claiming that she still saw her deceased parents and even conversed with them. Her words were confused, yet Bilal tried hard to calm her, to restore a semblance of reason. At length, our aunt stepped forward, clasping her hands together and scolding, our daughter is suffering too much trauma. It is best that you leave now. We will get her proper treatment, and when she is well again, I will arrange your marriage. Bilal, though distraught, explained that he had to leave the country for 6 months to complete his studies. He promised that he would return after 6 months and then marry Dua. He swore to my mother that he would take great care of her. With that, Bilal left, and my mother granted him a 6-month grace period, although neither Bilal nor Dua realized the true nature of my mother's designs. My mother's plan was more devious than it appeared. She had always dreamed of acquiring Uncle's entire estate. At this point, our uncle's will had declared that after marriage, all his property would belong to Dua. But my mother knew that Dua would never willingly choose to marry a man chosen by her. Therefore, she consulted the lawyer to find another way. The lawyer explained that if Dua did not marry voluntarily due to her unstable mental state, then custody of the property would automatically fall to my mother, as there were no other relatives. My mother listened intently, her mind already plotting how to secure the wealth. 2 days later, in a fit of cruelty, my mother dismissed the loyal old servant who had always cared for us. She told him, "I can now handle all the household work myself. Since my brother died, our business has suffered greatly, and we cannot afford unnecessary expenses." Although he protested weakly, she forced him out. With the old servant gone, my mother assumed full control over Dua. I, being the youngest and more sensitive, could not understand how our mother could harbor such hatred for the uncle and aunt who had once cared for us. Yet my elder brothers, partners in every one of her schemes, nodded in agreement. They believed that if everything were arranged, a lucrative business would soon be ours, and jobs would no longer be necessary. Later that day, my mother summoned us to discuss the future. "Starting tomorrow," she declared, "you will all go to Uncle's office to manage their affairs. Moreover, you do not need to study in a government college. I will enroll you in a prestigious private college." I wanted to protest that government colleges also provided good education, but I dared not challenge her, so I remained silent. Meanwhile, Dua remained locked in her room, oblivious to the plans unfolding around her. The next morning, my mother sent both of my brothers to Uncle's office to take over the management of the estate, and she herself ordered the household staff to rearrange the entire house. She had the large portraits of Uncle and Aunt removed and stored them in the storeroom. A loyal employee who had served Uncle faithfully for many years murmured that Dua Bibi would be furious when she saw all this. My mother reassured him in a stern tone, "If you wish to work here, listen carefully and do as I say, or I will have you removed." The employee was left speechless, aware of his place. By midday, my mother had completely transformed the layout of the house. Every possession of the uncle and aunt was moved to the storeroom. After lunch, Dua emerged from her room and was astonished by the changes. In a fit of anger, she demanded, "Who did all this?" My mother embraced her and said, "My dear, I did this for your own good. If you keep seeing these reminders of your parents, their memories will torment you. That is why I have kept everything in the storeroom for now." Enraged by her mother's words, Dua began arguing, but my mother rebuked her sharply, insisting that everything was for her benefit. In the midst of this turmoil, a new scene unfolded. That evening, while Dua was still arguing with our mother in the drawing room, I quietly slipped away to check on her. I found Dua sitting by the window, her eyes red and filled with unshed tears. I gently asked if she was all right, and she confided in me about the strange dreams and voices that haunted her nights. I promised her that I would do everything in my power to protect her and make sure that she could one day lead a normal life. Though my heart ached at the cruelty inflicted by our mother, I vowed silently to remain loyal to Dua, even if it meant opposing my mother's bitter plans. Thus, in our turbulent household, love and loyalty were constantly at odds with greed and cruelty. I, the sensitive youngest brother, felt torn between my duty to my family and the compassion I held for Dua. Despite the harsh measures our mother was taking to secure the estate, I could not help but hope that one day truth and love would prevail. They tied her up with great cruelty, and then the elder brother left the room. When he returned a short while later, he was carrying a bag containing a red substance. He poured it all over Dua's body, and upon seeing it, I screamed in horror. This was fresh blood, and Dua was even worse off, drenched in it. The elder brother said, "Your mother and your father died covered in blood, just like this. Now you will follow the same path." Dua was in such a terrible state that she could only scream continuously. The two brothers spent the entire night torturing her, repeatedly recounting the painful stories of her parents' suffering, and as she watched the blood, she went mad with terror. I sat silently in a corner, paralyzed by shock, unable to stop my elder brothers or rescue Dua. They had not inflicted physical injuries on her, But the mental torment was so severe that by morning her condition had deteriorated and she fell unconscious. After that, both brothers left the room, and I could only watch Dua in tears. I had even untied her arms and legs before leaving her there. Later at the breakfast table, our mother and brothers were sitting together, laughing and saying, "Now she will never be the same. After all the torture we gave her, she will never come out of her room again." The effects of the drugs were also evident. It felt as though our mother and brothers were not human at all, but savage beasts. After a while, both brothers went off to the office, busy managing the business, while our mother went to her room and fell asleep. I felt immense pity for Dua and could not understand how I might help her. Unable to bear it any longer, I left the house and went straight to our uncle's old lawyer. I told him everything, from the beginning until the end, without thinking of what might happen to our mother or my brothers, because my heart went out to Dua. The lawyer was utterly stunned by my account. He wanted to report the matter to the police, but I stopped him, clasping my hands before him, saying, "And I cannot bear to see my mother go to jail. Please handle this quietly." The lawyer returned home and then went to see Dua, but our mother refused, saying that she was sleeping. Our mother always made such excuses. The lawyer, growing angry, declared, "I am going to inform the police. I understand very well the game you are playing." At these words, our mother panicked, and the lawyer forcefully gained access to Dua. Her condition was so poor that he immediately took her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, for the drugs had rendered her a full-blown psychiatric patient. The lawyer then threatened our mother, saying that if she did not vacate the house, he would tell the police everything, because Dua's test results clearly showed what kind of drug she had been given. In the end, our mother's entire plan had failed, and we all returned to our own home. Our mother had tried so hard to seize our uncle's property, but because of my gentle nature, her plans fell apart, and she never knew that all of this had happened because of me. In a fit of anger, our mother finally uttered a truth that left us all astonished. She declared, "Your uncle was your step-uncle. All this property belongs to him. I only wish to seize it because I detest that, as soon as your father died, my husband remarried. They were the sons of my stepmother, with whom I had no relation at all." I was astonished to hear this, for despite being a step relative, our uncle had always been very kind to us. Yet some people are simply unworthy, and my mother was no exception. She could not bear the thought of showing any sympathy toward our uncle. In return for our uncle's years of love and compassion, my mother had inflicted such pain on his only daughter that now she lay in a psychiatric hospital bed. I would secretly visit Dua whenever I could, and gradually she began to recover. I even informed Bilal about her condition, and he too remained in contact with her. The doctors had said that in 2 or 3 months, Dua would be completely well. Bilal promised me that once he returned, he would marry her and take excellent care of her. He was a well-educated, affluent young man, someone capable of supporting and caring for Dua. As Dua slowly improved, she started smiling again at my presence, and that filled me with both relief and remorse. I had apologized to her many times for what had happened, but she always forgave me. She would say, "You have always treated me kindly and cared for me. Why do you keep apologizing?" I wanted to tell her how deeply ashamed I was of what my own mother had done, yet I could not bear to burden her further with my guilt. My heart ached when I recalled how my mother, instead of embracing Dua with love, had played games of hatred. Had my mother loved her own niece, perhaps Dua would have received the care and affection she deserved. Instead, my mother's bitter and hateful games had deprived her not only of many things in this life, but had also destroyed her prospects for a peaceful afterlife. Sometimes a person becomes so blinded by the greed for wealth and the flames of hatred that he forgets the difference between right and wrong. My mother had become completely blinded in that manner. I thank God every day that, at least that night, my brothers had not subjected Dua to any further sexual abuse. Otherwise, she might never have recovered in this lifetime. May God protect all daughters and keep them safe from those who have no trace of humanity in their hearts. Over time, the once unbearable memories began to fade. I continued to visit Dua whenever I could, offering her small comforts and words of hope. Bilal kept his promise in return from abroad, and true to his word, he married Dua. Their wedding, though surrounded by the dark memories of the past, marked a turning point in our lives. Slowly, with each passing day, Dua regained her strength and her ability to smile genuinely. The support from Bilal and the kindness of those who cared for her provided a ray of hope in a once hopeless existence. In the wake of these events, our family gradually started to heal. I too learned that no matter how deep the wounds of betrayal and cruelty may run, time and compassion can mend even the most shattered hearts. I began to understand that, although my mother's actions had been driven by her own greed and bitterness, they did not have to define our future. I made it my mission to protect Dua and help her rebuild her life, determined that she would never be defined by the cruelty of others. In the end, love and forgiveness began to prevail. Bilal's support, combined with Dua's own resilient spirit, paved the way for a new beginning. Our family, though scarred by past misdeeds, found solace in the truth that even the darkest moments can give birth to light. I realized that our lives were not destined to be marred by hatred and betrayal. Rather, we could choose to rise above it and create a future filled with compassion and understanding. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Dua's recovery became a symbol of hope for us all. The wounds inflicted by our mother's cruelty slowly healed, and the painful memories began to recede into the background. Our family found strength in unity, and even though the past could not be erased, it no longer controlled our lives. I learned that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, one must hold on to hope and strive for a better tomorrow. May God grant us the strength to overcome our hardships and protect all those who are vulnerable. And so, our story, filled with heartbreak, cruelty, and redemption, came to serve as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a new beginning is possible if we choose to embrace love and compassion over hate and despair.